Intermittent fasting is full of benefits. It can extend your life expectancy, it can help you lose fat, it can improve your cognitive performance, and it can so much more. But are you doing the right amount of fasting hours for your body? We all want to believe that things are black and white, that something is either good or bad for our health, and although we would all prefer this to be true, the evidence shows us time and time again otherwise. The benefits of intermittent fasting are enormous, but they are much more sustainable if you can sustain them over time. Our health is never black and white, and many times the difference between medicine and poison is simply in the dosage. A year of fasting will kill us, but a few hours of fasting per day can make us live longer. The difference is in the amount of hours. This obviously leads us to wonder why we don't all need the same amount of fasting hours. Surely you would like to know what kind of fasting and how to do it, so you never have to think about it again. So in this video, we will talk about various tips and advice on how to fast. What are the advantages and disadvantages? Also, you will learn how to manage your food. And please, if you want, after watching the video, leave us a comment telling us your experience, ideas or tips to help us improve the channel. Let's get started. For example, does a person who is 100 kilos overweight need the same fast as an elite athlete who is already at his ideal weight and is active all day? Is a fast for an active and growing child the same as for a sedentary and overweight adult? Obviously not. The first factor that is going to modify the recommended fasting is obviously the weight we have and how much of that is fat. Basically, what is our body fat percentage and also what is our goal? The fasting of someone who wants to lose as much weight as possible, as fast as possible, is not the same as the fasting of someone who wants to gain weight, but wants to gain lean mass or muscle, and not fat. In the latter case, if you want to gain muscle without gaining fat, because you are a person who has always had trouble gaining weight, my recommendation would be to do 16 hours of fasting and 8 hours of intake. But it's not just a matter of hours, it's a matter of when you do those fasting hours and how you distribute your meals within the intake window. Within the period in which you're going to eat, in the case of gaining lean mass, muscle without fat, I recommend that the 16 hours of fasting be from dinner to late lunch. For example, if you have dinner at 9 o'clock and eat with your family, do not sacrifice your social relations for fasting. Much of our happiness depends, in fact, on our bonds, and our social interaction, so also, sometimes it depends on the treatment. For example, if you eat alone and you have the possibility, I recommend that you make a video call with someone who is also alone. This simple act does wonders for our mental health. But going back to fasting, if it is done at 9 o'clock at night on the basis of eating approximately from 9 to 9:30 and from 9 to 10, therefore, the ideal in that case is to have lunch at 14 o'clock and avoid meals before that. And if you consume some kind of mass gainer or the supplement that increases the amount of calories consumed, I recommend that you do it between those two meals, between lunch and dinner, so that it is within your intake period. If you want to lose the maximum amount of weight possible in the shortest amount of time and you have no health problems, my recommendation is to eat only one meal per day. I say no health problems because this situation has several contraindications that you will see later in this video. You can tell me I don't care about the contraindications or the problems it brings. I want to lose weight and that's it, but these contraindications are precisely situations where it will be difficult for you to lose weight due to hormonal problems that are generated. So if you have any hormonal difficulty, you should follow the appropriate advice for that circumstance. For something we are seeing how to customize fasting in this video. One meal a day allows us to do two very important things. First, it prevents us from exceeding calories. It is very difficult to consume in one sitting 4,000 calories. And, especially if they are from good food, from good sources. Secondly, to maximize the amount of fat that we can use and burn per day, because when we fast for so many hours, the carbohydrates that we consume in our diet are used up, we use up our liver glycogen reserves, and not to mention if we exercise after this intake, because we also use up the glycogen reserves of the muscles. Once we use up all the liver reserves, which generally last approximately 12 hours, we begin to use fat to produce energy. A 23-hour fast with 1 hour of intake means in general terms that during 11 hours of the day you are going to use your own fat to produce energy, and if you exercise after the intake, the effect is even more potent. The easiest thing to do is to have only one meal a day, just dinner, especially if we are busy during the day or have social events. But the healthiest thing to do, really, would be to only eat lunch. This is one of the situations where we unfortunately have to choose between productivity and social ties, or else do the healthier pattern. When we eat lunch, especially if we eat a lot, our post-lunch productivity is reduced, we are less alert, and depending on our intake, we may feel more tired due to the effect of our parasympathetic system. Here it really depends on what you prefer, whether it's a question of weight, productivity, or cognitive performance. You can choose to just have dinner. But weight and your goal is not the only variant you have to take into account. If we only think about that, we could do a lot of damage. One of the most important factors we have to consider is our level of physical activity. Here the premises are simpler. For aerobic exercises of long duration, I do not recommend fasting. Unfortunately, the production of energy that your body can make from fat, if you have been fasting for 12 or 16 hours, is not enough for your body to function for 2 hours doing a strong aerobic exercise. Therefore, in terms of exercise and fasting, I recommend the following: gym, weight training, or calisthenics on an empty stomach. If your intention is to lose weight, yes, you can do it. If your intention is to lose fat but maintain muscle, you can also do it. But if you want to gain muscle mass and you are underweight, I do not recommend that you do it on an empty stomach. And while I do not recommend fasting aerobic exercises of long duration, if the exercise is short, or are interval exercises, you could do them during fasting hours. Also remember, if you are exercising, if you want to naturally boost your muscle mass gain, you can use creatine before going to exercise, and essential amino acids during or after exercise. All this to speed up that recovery. What should I do if I normally exercise a lot? You have to adjust your fasting. If I have very demanding days in my training, I can simply reduce the fasting hours on those days, in order to boost my physical performance, and increase the fasting hours on the days I don't exercise. This trick is particularly useful if you want to lose weight and achieve more muscle definition at the same time. On the other hand, there are many special situations regarding fasting. One of the most frequently asked questions is, without a doubt, can a child or teenager do intermittent fasting? The answer is it depends. It depends. If a child is very overweight, in general terms it will be more beneficial for his health to do a little fasting, at most 16 fasting and 8 eating. But in the vast majority of cases, a child or adolescent who is still growing, needs to spend as many hours as possible in anabolism to develop properly according to their genetic potential. So, in general terms, my recommendation is that they do not fast, and this is without even taking into account that a nutritional deficit has much more serious consequences in children than in adults. But no other situation is as delicate as the development of a human being both in utero and in the first years of life. During these periods, our body is almost 100% of the time dedicated to building tissue and developing. The caloric and micronutrient requirements during this period will define our health for practically our entire life. Therefore, under no circumstances should you fast during pregnancy or lactation. This does not mean that fasting is bad, it simply means that there are scenarios where it is not a good idea. One of the factors that we least take into account when adjusting our fasting is the weather. The temperature in which we are exposed to can completely change the reaction to fasting, and make what could have benefited you, harm you. What does this look like? In cold climates, our body consumes more calories per day, simply to maintain our body temperature. They are called calories for a reason. Therefore, I should find it easier to lose weight in cold climates than in warm climates. Many hours of fasting could make it difficult for me to maintain the correct body temperature. In fact, as extremely important data, I tell you that if after many hours of fasting you start to get very cold, without the weather having changed or other justification such as hypothyroidism, you may be doing too many hours of fasting. But these are not the only variables that we have to take into account. Then we have something much more personal, as we are going to see below. One of them is the menstrual cycle. While it may seem that your menstrual cycle has nothing to do with fasting, there are days of the menstrual cycle where you can safely increase the hours of fasting, and days where you should reduce it. Generally speaking, the concept is as follows. A woman's menstrual cycle has two main phases, one governed by estrogen and the other by progesterone. High levels of stress can prevent the peak of progesterone in the last days of the cycle, from the 21st day, and fasting is still a stress for your body. So the recommendations are as follows: if you do a 16/8 fast, you're going to be able to fast for the entire cycle because it's usually not a problem. But one meal a day usually increases the cortisol and the stress that we have, which lowers the hours of fasting the last days of the cycle. The effect of this stress of one meal a day is so important in the body that a study showed how during Ramadan, where only one meal a day is eaten, 30% of the women studied had some hormonal alteration of their cycle, while prior to this fast, only 11% of those same women had alteration of the cycle. The dilemma is that Ramadan is a dry fast, not just a one meal a day fast with fluid intake during the day, but we all deal with high levels of stress. Today more and more is demanded of us in exchange for less. This and the way we handle it can be very harmful to our health. That means that if you are facing very high periods of stress in your life, you don't have to exceed the hours of fasting you do. The rule is simple: do not exceed 16 hours of fasting in very high levels of stress, unless you are compensating with meditation, or something that helps you deal with that stress. A trick you can use if you are in these situations, is to consume the carbohydrates that you are going to eat that day at night, because they help you to reduce the level of cortisol. This is also useful if you find it difficult to feel full, or if fasting causes insomnia. How do you put this into practice? A dinner that helps you to solve all these points would be, for example, an animal protein with cooked or raw vegetables such as greens, for example, and after about 30 or 40 minutes of having eaten that dish, we can eat some carbohydrates of a not so high glycemic index, such as baked sweet potatoes for example. If you are gaining muscle mass, gaining weight, it may be of a higher glycemic index. While splitting your dinner may be unorthodox, this accomplishes three things. First, it makes you satiated for longer. On the other hand, consuming some carbohydrates in the evening helps you reduce cortisol and the price your body pays for stress. And third, it makes it easier to fall asleep. Needless to say, if your goal is to lose weight extremely fast, this is not the best idea. It's a very sustainable idea, very healthy in the long run. And if you are interested in longevity and good quality of life for as long as you are alive and you know the benefits of fasting, obviously the premise is going to be I want to do the maximum amount of fasting per day to enhance the processes that make you live longer. Here the concept is very simple: more fasting within 24 hours, more benefits, but obviously more risk of other things, such as nutritional deficits or excessive weight loss. So, once you are at your ideal weight, level off the fasting. Remember to always consult your doctor before any change in your diet that you want to make. Before finishing, and in summary, if you want to lose weight, you can do many more hours of fasting than if you want to gain weight or gain muscle. If you do a lot of aerobic activity, reduce the amount of fasting hours of the day you do activity, and do not do that type of exercise on an empty stomach, especially if it is of long duration. While if you train in a gym, if you can afford to fast, keep in mind that too many hours of fasting could reduce your weightlifting performance. Don't go for a personal record while fasting. In children, teenagers and pregnant women, fasting is not recommended, except in very special cases. If you live in a very cold climate, you should fast less hours than in a warmer climate, or at least compensate with the amount of intake and the amount of calories consumed. There are many factors that can vary the effects of fasting, such as menstruation or stress. Reduce fasting on the 21st day of your menstrual period, and try meditating or relaxing with something else if you are feeling very stressed and are fasting. Don't forget that fasting itself can cause stress. If you liked the video, share it with your family and friends, subscribe to the channel and like it.